Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow. It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, I got Jack McCurry rolling with me. How you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing well. Off work today. Gonna go to the gym later. Wrap up my Christmas stuff. So, how's things going on your end?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to go to work in about an hour or so. But we want to get in here and discuss this Browns-Ravens matchup from yesterday. Go through a mock draft, which Jack has so kindly decided to let me talk about finally. So we'll discuss that later on. But Jack, the Browns fell to the Baltimore Ravens yesterday, 31-15, officially eliminating them from playoff contention, even though it would have taken an absolute miracle for them to make the playoffs. Even though they were halfway to that miracle yesterday, because everything that they needed to happen yesterday did, except for beating the Ravens, which we'll get to in a little bit. But, I guess, here we are, another Browns season in the books, officially being eliminated from playoffs. I know a lot of times in years past we've been eliminated in like week 2 or 3, or the running joke has been, well, we kick off the NFL season and the Browns have been eliminated from the playoffs. But now that we seem to have some things in place, it took till week 16 to officially eliminate us. And my question to you is, are we finally at the point where the talent's there to make the playoffs? It's just a matter of figuring everything else out.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think you look at this roster when it's at full strength. Now, obviously, it's not because of injuries and, other unfortunate circumstances. But, we came into the season thinking this was a playoff team. The offense, it speaks for itself with the amount of talent on that side of the ball. There was players on the defensive side that we thought were either going to take a step or are already established to the point where they can carry the defense. But we knew the flaws, the offensive line, the depth at linebacker, the depth in the secondary, and obviously now on the defensive line as well after some moves that we've made. I definitely think this is still a team that could go to the playoffs, but obviously coaching and other unfortunate circumstances, players getting in their own way, have stopped this team from reaching its true potential in this 2019 season.
Yeah, it's been a long and frustrating year, and I think you're right. I think, Freddie said it this week, and I'm surprised that this was the first time he said it, that a lot of the times the Browns have gotten in their own way of, being able to win football games, and he's included in that, whether it be, bad play calling or penalties, etc. And, unfortunately, that's how this season happened, and they will be missing the playoffs for another consecutive year since 2002. We wanted, because it's Christmas in a couple days, we wanted to break this game down in a different way, and we wanted to do a naughty and nice list about the game yesterday. And I know there will be no more naughty than nice, but I guess the nice thing, Jack, and we were kind of surprised about this, and the fans in the stadium were surprised, but the Browns were able to shut out the Ravens for the first 28 minutes of the football game. Despite what happened next, that's a pretty darn good effort, considering you're facing the top offense in the NFL and you're able to shut them out for 28 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was at work during the first half, and any chance I could, I would try to catch the game on TV, and seeing that they were able to move the ball up and down the field on the defense to a degree, and then they couldn't put points on the board, and the same was vice versa for the Baltimore Ravens. Like they were running the ball really well, and they did it the entire game, but then they would try to throw, and Lamar was either overshooting his target or going off of receivers' hands, pretty much like how the Browns have had to face that all season. And obviously the Browns were able to strike on a touchdown. Good throw to Demetrius Harris. Finally was able to haul that one in. And things looked like they were going well. It kind of looked like, week 4, like, the Browns were controlling the game. They were going to go into the halftime with a lead, and then that's when everything started to fall apart.
Yeah, that takes us right into the naughty part of this list. And, the clock management situation at the end of first half was not done well by Freddie Kitchens. And you're only going to hold this Ravens team down for so long. And when they got that first touchdown, you're like, okay, we'll get the ball back. We'll be able to run out the clock. The Ravens don't have any timeouts left. But instead of running out the clock and going into the half with it being 7-6 Ravens, the Browns had a terrible offensive series, punted the ball away. Ravens marched right down the field, scored another touchdown, and they were able to score 2 touchdowns in the final 2 minutes of the half with 0 timeouts.
Yeah, I mean, and this was one of the points where I was able to stop and actually watch the game during work. I seen that they'd scored touchdown to take the lead 7-6, and I just thought we'd run the clock out, go to halftime. And then for some reason they ran 3 straight pass plays and only burned 15 seconds off the clock. Now, granted, Baltimore doesn't have any timeouts. So as soon as they did that, and then there's the moment you've seen the clip on Twitter where, the fans are booing, Baker's trying to wave them off, trying to calm them down, and then a fan flips Baker off. And it's just like, oh, God. I said, here we go. And I looked at my coworker. I said, this is it. I said, watch, Baltimore's going to score again. I said, this is a ball game. Lo and behold, 2 big chunk plays, and then they take a 14-6 lead. And that right then was when I knew. I said, this game's over. I said, here comes the blowout. I even texted it to you. I said, blowout incoming. And I knew right then. I said, once they get the lead and that offense starts to put their foot on the pedal, I said, there ain't no letting back, especially against a team like Baltimore that's just been red hot, since the first time we played them.
And because the Browns took the ball to start the game, the Ravens got it at the beginning of the second half. So what made this issue even worse at the end of the first half is the Ravens got the ball to start the second half. They go right down the field, score another touchdown, boom, 21-6, and the game's pretty much over at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes when if you take the ball to start the game, you want to send a message to the opposing defense, but against Baltimore, I could see like they didn't want their offense to strike first on us. It happened last week in Arizona. Arizona got the ball first, ran it right down our throat. I think the mindset was, if we won the toss, we wanted to try to, set the tone offensively and show them that we weren't afraid of their defense. And unfortunately, it came back to bite us because, like you said, they scored back-to-back drives to close out the first half, and then they get the ball to start the second half, ran it right down our throat, and then they capitalized again, and it's 21-6, so we're already in a deep hole. My thing is, Freddie's done this several times. He did it against Seattle, he did it against New England, and he did it again today or on Sunday against Baltimore. I don't get why he tries to be so aggressive at the end of the first half, especially when I think in all these cases we didn't get the ball to start the second half in any of those instances. So instead of just taking the points or trying to run out the clock, all he did was reignite the opponent and then put us in a deeper hole. I just don't get what his line of thinking is. And I know he explains it, but at the end of the day, I still don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand either. And, I've been a real proponent of whoever's on, or there should be somebody on a coaching staff that their direct job and their only job is to deal with clock management situations. You know, I know that mostly falls on head coach, but if you have an independent guy doing it, it kind of takes the emotion out of it, especially when you're the play caller like Freddie Kitchens is. Taking the emotion out of it, taking the thinking out of it, and having one guy that is able to solve all those clock management issues, I think would go a long way in helping head coaches out in those kinds of situations.
Yeah, I mean, some coaches get it, some first-year coaches get it, but I mean, Freddie didn't get it. Hugh never got it, and I don't think Pat Shermer ever got it. I don't remember having an issue with Chud or Pettin when it came to clock management, but this is like I don't think when they do these interviews, I think you need to hamper them on or press them on these clock management things, because it just seems like the Browns continue to get these first-time head coaches that have absolutely no clue how to deal with the clock, and it makes me wonder, like, if they don't know how to do that, how can you trust them to lead a football team?
Exactly. Let's add to the naughty list here, and it came on the Ravens' first touchdown from Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews, and Jake Trotter posted the Next Gen Stats play video on his Twitter account, and it shows all the little dots moving, and you can see the coverage that the Browns ran. And watching that video and then looking at the actual replay, you have to wonder, Jack, what in the world is Demarius Randall doing on his play? Looking at it, you could also see that it could be T.J. Carey's man. That Mark Andrews could have been his man, and Randall expected the help there. But just looking at the effort, you have to wonder, has he checked out?
Oh, he definitely has. I mean, you could see it last week in Arizona. Ever since they benched him against, I think it was Pittsburgh, I mean, Randall's checked out. I mean, it's clear that he's no longer in the future plans of the Browns. And, it's unfortunate because he was a fan favorite. But, I mean, on the field, he's been bad this year. He wasn't the same player he was a year ago. Yeah, he's definitely quit. He's not the only one. You could see it in some other players' efforts. But yeah, Randall's definitely checked out. I mean, it seems like Njoku has checked out. I think there was a reason why he was inactive again yesterday. So I think a lot of players are sick of Freddie, and it's unfortunate because there is some talented players. Rashard Higgins is right there as well. But yeah, there's going to be some changes to this team, and unfortunately some talented players are going to leave once again. But I mean, if you're going to have effort and attitude like that, you don't deserve to be a part of this team or any team for that matter.
True. I'm going to add one bonus to the nice list, even though we didn't write it down, is we actually got to see Rashard Higgins yesterday. He was on there on the one kickoff return and actually had the return because the kick was short. So it was nice to actually see him yesterday, and that might be one of the last times we do see him in a Browns uniform. Adding to the nice list, you have to wonder, Jack, where this has been all year. But the touchdown pass from Baker Mayfield to Odell Beckham Jr. In the corner of the end zone on that nice fade. We've been in, pretty much everybody has been wanting, those one-on-one situations with Odell Beckham inside the red zone. And they got one of those few opportunities yesterday, and he cashed in on it with that touchdown catch. It did make the score 21-15 at that point. And, they were still within, or 24-15 at that point, my bad. And they were able to kind of make it a little bit closer. They weren't able to get the 2-point conversion. But that's one play, Jack, I think we've been waiting to see all year, and they were able to cash in on it for once yesterday.
Yeah, I got home from work, and right when I flipped on the TV, I got to see the pass, and I'm like, we had to wait till week 16 to see a red zone touchdown from Baker to Odell, and it's like, man, why didn't we see this all season? And we talked about the Harris touchdown earlier. That seemed to be like the guy Baker would go to in the red zone would be Demetrius Harris, which is crazy because of the amount of talent we have on this offense. But, it was a good ball, a good, Odell got his feet in. It was perfect. Like, it's just a shame that that's only Beckham's third touchdown all season, and that's the first time in the red zone we've able to see that hookup. So, too little, too late, but I mean, it was still nice to see. So yeah, there's that.
And as I mentioned, the Browns went for 2. They did not get it. It was a pass to Ricky Seals-Jones, which he should have caught. It hit him right in the hands, and the Browns should have got the 2-point conversion, which only would have put them down 7. I don't have a problem going for 2, Jack, that early in the game. In that situation, I have no problem with it. If Ricky Seals-Jones catches that ball, it's really a non-issue because it was a great play design. It wasn't like it was a terrible play call or anything. They ran a really good play, and it should have been converted for a 2-point conversion. So I don't really have any problem with going for 2 at that point. But the last thing on our naughty list is after that, I didn't see it because I was there in the stadium, but I heard about it later, is Freddie Kitchens and Odell really going at it after that 2-point conversion. And, they were talking for like a good 5 minutes or so over on the sideline. And, I'm not one for lip reading, but what do you think was really said during that conversation between those two?
Yeah, I mean, because I texted you right away. I said, "Oh, Freddie and OBJ are going at it," and you could see Odell said it's because of him. Now, Freddie wouldn't explain what was being said. He goes, "You guys need to talk to Odell about that," which I thought was really weird. Like, why can't you just be upfront and say this is what we were talking about? Beckham says it was because of the official who had been, picking on Odell because, Odell got called for taunting earlier in the game for, doing the little rascals wave at the Ravens bench after he had made a catch. And then there was obviously some other thing, like he was being held, wasn't getting called. People seem to think that he was going after Baker, saying it's because of him why I'm not getting the ball. But it's so funny because it was right after he got a touchdown. So who knows where the truth is and all that. We all know Odell. He's a top wide receiver. He's a diva. He's gonna complain about stuff, and he's obviously all season he says that the NFL has been targeting him for certain things, with whether it's the cleats, the visor, whatever. If Odell's got a problem with Baker, that's something obviously that needs to be resolved. Obviously their timing, their chemistry hasn't been on point. Whether it's because Baker or Odell didn't come to OTAs. Obviously, Odell's been limited all season in practice because of his sports hernia. But if there's an issue there, that needs to get fixed. But Odell needs to understand the refs aren't going to cater to him. He just needs to go out and play the game. I mean, if he's not, he needs to fight through all these penalties and everything that people are coming after him. If you're going to be the superstar wide receiver, make yourself open to get the ball. Plain and simple at the end of the day.
Yeah, there were a few questionable penalties yesterday, and I'm not really going to discuss it. But, the situation between Freddie and Odell, I think it's finally come to a head. I don't know if it was like you talked about the actual play or if it was about the referees yesterday. I don't know if we'll ever know about that, but I'm not surprised that we saw what we did yesterday on the sideline. And to wrap this up, I talked about the penalties. I guess we'll talk about this one. Is there's a Browns player who got hurt on the Ravens sideline, and Browns players, the defensive players, were over there kind of tending to him, and I noticed it right away because I saw Richardson and Thomas kind of draw at somebody on the Ravens sideline, and I guess it was Marcus Peters, and they drawed a little bit, and they kind of separated, but Richardson was really upset and kept on trying to go back at the Ravens sideline, and eventually got flagged for a sports-like penalty, and that gave the Ravens a first down, and then they got a touchdown on the ground on the very next play. Jack, watching that, did you see anything different than I did with the stuff that's going on the Ravens sideline? I know there was a player hurt, and I think they're in a TV timeout at that point, so I don't know if they showed anything when the TV got back from commercial, but Sheldon Richardson was very upset, and it makes me really curious what Marcus Peters said / did.
Yeah, I mean, it was Sheldrick Redwine that got hurt. So yeah, the play Richardson was like one of the first guys over there, him and Thomas, and they go to commercial and they're standing there. The Ravens trainers are calling the Browns people over to come get Redwine, and they come back from break and they said, "Oh, there was an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty." I'm sure something was said, especially by the Ravens, based on their history, and Marcus Peters has always had a big mouth. But they're showing Richardson, and he's standing there, and there's a couple of officials in front of him, and I'm pretty sure Freddie said that Richardson was told to go back to his sideline. Richardson didn't go. Obviously, Richardson has a history of being, controversial, and he's not going to stand down, which I don't fault him for that. You fight for your teammates, and when you don't want to start a fight, but don't back down. So that's when they threw the flag, obviously. And then I guess, I don't know if Richardson said something to Freddie, but Freddie said, the post game that he benched Richardson for that. Obviously Freddie's been holding players accountable as it pertains to recent weeks. So whatever was said or what Richardson did or attempted to do, Freddie wasn't going to stand for that. And obviously at that point, the Browns were down 9. And as soon as that penalty was assessed, the Ravens scored a touchdown. So I don't think it really mattered. But, I don't fault Richardson for standing his ground, but you obviously got to be smarter when the officials tell you to go back to the sideline. You should probably do that.
Yeah, I don't fault him either for standing his ground. But, before the officials threw the flag, there were 3 separate occasions where one referee tried to usher him back to where the ball was / the Browns sideline, and each time he turned back around and said something towards the Ravens sideline. So, at that point, that falls on Sheldon to listen to the refs and do what they say in order to not get a penalty. And I don't know how much it mattered in the result of the game. The Ravens were probably going to win anyway, but when it directly leads to a touchdown because Freddie had to take you out, it really looks bad on you as a player for what happened at that point. All right, that's going to wrap up the discussion in that game. And to continue with the Christmas theme, Jack, every year, kids write letters to Santa asking for things for Christmas. And what I wanted to ask you was if Jimmy Haslam was to write a letter to Santa on behalf of the Browns for things for his organization, what should he put on that list?
Well, I think at the top, he should want a strong leader as his next head coach. I think it's apparent that they are going to make a change there based on, the debacle these last couple of weeks, just what the entire season has been. But I think more or less he needs a strong leader at that head coaching position. They've gone out and looked for these young offensive minds, these great play callers, but out behind the scenes, it seems like it's been a free-for-all, whether it's under Hugh Jackson, whether it's under Freddie Kitchens. You look back at the final 8 games last year against Greg Williams, or with Greg Williams as the head coach. He was a strong leader. You didn't hear players mouthing off. You didn't hear players, quitting. The attention to detail was precise under Greg Williams. And I think that's something that the Browns need to go out and find for their next head coach. I don't think they need to find a first-time head coach. They might go to the college ranks, but I don't know if you should go there. There's a couple guys in mind, but I think they need that strong leader and that veteran presence at the head coaching position, something they haven't had since Eric Mangini, and that was almost 10 years ago. So I think that should be the number one thing Haslam is putting on his wish list if he's going to Santa for that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that's the direction that they should go. I know we're not expecting Freddie to be back next year, and to get a good proven leader in here, I don't know if that's McCarthy. I don't know if that's Ron Rivera. I don't know if that's somebody that's been a college coach for a long time.
Unmute your mic, Anthony.
But I don't know who that guy will be. So we'll see what they decide to do with the head coaching position, and we'll cross that bridge when it comes. And I would imagine that next Sunday night or early Monday morning, we'll be talking about all the different head coaching candidates that the Browns are going to be looking at. All right, this is kind of an early Christmas gift to me from Jack. We get to talk draft, and this is really the first time that we really get to dive into this. And last week over on the Dogland, I put out my Browns mock draft 1.0, where I used the Draft Network's mock draft simulator, drafted all 7 rounds for the Cleveland Browns. I looked at a few different options based on who was still available when the Browns picked, and from there, I made the selection for the Browns and did that for all 7 rounds. So, Jack, I think when you're talking draft for the Browns, I think the biggest need that they have to look at is offensive line. And that's where I went in round 1, drafting Alex Leatherwood. Now, there were some good guys, good prospects available at that selection. Derek Brown, the defensive tackle from Auburn, who's probably going to go in the top 10, but because he was still available there, I put him on that list. Dylan Moses, a linebacker from Alabama, with Joe Schobert and Christian Kirksey. Not sure if they're coming back or not. That's why I took a linebacker in that position. And the other guy from Wisconsin, the center, Tyler, I'm going to butcher your last name, Biadasz, I think that's right. Close enough. I know he's a center, but he can play both guard spots. And if you wanted for a year or two while Treader is still there, you could put him at right guard and solidify the interior of the line and, grow that way. And then when Treader leaves, you could move Tyler to center position. But the guy I ultimately went with was Alex Leatherwood, the offensive tackle, left tackle from Alabama, to really shore up that spot, or potentially shore up that spot going into next season.
Yeah, I mean, based on the early stuff that I've looked at for the draft, there is a strong depth at the top of the draft at offensive tackle. Andrew Thomas out of Georgia, Andrew Wirfs out of Iowa. Alabama has 2 solid tackles in Leatherwood and Jedrick Wills. So, I mean, you can't go wrong. And even Austin Jackson out of USC, which I did a mock before we recorded, and that was my pick at pick 15 for the Browns. Jackson's a tackle out of USC. So there is a ton of offensive tackles up in the top half of the first round. And that's the number one need for the Browns going into this offseason. They need to address left tackle and right tackle. I don't know if you can get both in this draft. Obviously, I haven't looked too much into it, but if they can get that solid left tackle moving forward, that's going to help not only the Browns' offensive line as a whole, it's also going to help Baker Mayfield as he continues to progress as an NFL quarterback.
To answer the question, yes, you can get a right tackle in this draft, and in the second round, there were 4 guys available that I thought would really, 3 of the 4. The one I put on there just because. But at the 46th pick, Yatir Gross-Matos, the edge rusher from Penn State, was available, so I included him. J.K. Dobbins was still available. I know we don't need a running back, but just because he was there, I stuck him on the list. Bryce Hall, a cornerback out of Virginia. He's a 6'1" guy. He's a 6'1" corner. He's very good ball skills and is great at tackling, something the Browns defensive backs really need to work on. So I put him on that list. And the guy who I ended up selecting was a right tackle, Lucas Niang, from TCU, who actually had a very good game last season against the Buckeyes when going up against guys like Nick Bosa and Chase Young. So he's one guy, Jack, who many have called kind of plug and play at the right tackle position. So if you're able to go into next year with a left tackle in the first round and Lucas Niang maybe in the second round, you could potentially shore up that offensive line, and hopefully it's something you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, Niang had a great game against Bosa and Young. I would like if they could somehow come away with their starting left and right tackle out of this draft within the first couple rounds, that'd be great going forward, because you have Bitonio, who's still fairly young. Tretter's our center for the next couple seasons. Wyatt Teller hasn't been bad at right guard, and he should be the projected starting right guard going into next season. That would be great. And obviously if they pick up, Brian Bulaga has been a name that's been buzzing around in terms of free agency. If they can sign him to like a 3-year deal, and maybe Niang, they put the final polish on him, and then in a year or two they put him at right tackle and move on from Bulaga, that would be a best case scenario going forward.
Yeah, I think you'll see. I know Chris Hubbard won't be back, but I can see them signing a right tackle. I don't know if they want to go into next season with 2 rookie tackles, one on each side. You have to wonder what that would do for the offense, but there'd be a lot of pressure on those 2 guys to perform really well as rookies. But I could definitely see them adding a veteran, both at right tackle and at left tackle when they do draft these guys, to kind of help them out. So that way, they're not going into next year completely on their own. But hopefully those guys, if they do draft them, can lock it down, and you don't have to worry about having anyone behind them long term. In the third round,
I just want to add that real quick. They may even bring back Kendall Lamb. Like, obviously the injury concerns are there, but when he's been able to get on the field, like, you could see a difference between him and Chris Hubbard. Like, and it's not going to cost us a lot to bring back Lamb again. Like I said, the injury's there, but you can play, and he could be a definite at least 6th lineman, and then you bring him in, and then you can draft a guy and go from there as well.
And you also have Drew Forbes, who you have to factor into that situation as well. In the third round, there are 3 players that I looked at. Another offensive tackle, Trey Adams. I know last year he was one of the guys that I looked at that I wanted the Browns to draft, but he decided to go back to school. He went back because he had a bad injury and didn't think his draft stock would be really high, but he's right now projected in the third round range, and he's a player that if he came out last year, he could potentially already be on the Browns and in that tackle situation. Colin Johnson, wide receiver out of Texas. He is 6'6". He's a traditional red zone threat. If anyone's followed me over on Twitter for the last few years, he's one guy that I really wanted on the Browns. He's a classic goes up and gets a receiver. He has ridiculous wingspan, catch radius. I think he would fit in really well in the red zone aspect of this team. The other guy is a defensive tackle out of Utah, Leki Fotu. 6'5", 335 defensive tackle. He was all Pac-12 in 2018. He had 8 tackles for loss this season outside of the bowl game. he's the guy that you could pair in there in that defensive line with Larry Ogunjobi, Sheldon Richardson, a guy you could add in that rotation. I know Sheldon's only here for a couple more years, so this is a guy you can develop, and he's the guy who I ultimately selected for the Browns with that third-round pick.
Yeah, one of the pressing needs for this Browns team, and we even talked about it, during the preseason, was the interior of that defensive line, because behind Richardson and Ogunjobi, it's been a revolving door there during the season. And obviously, we tried to bring in Gerald McCoy, we tried to bring in Mike Daniels. They missed the boat in last year's draft. There's a ton of guys, that interior defensive line through rounds 1 through 7, that could have come in and helped. And they're helping other teams like Arizona, Kansas City, Kalen Saunders, Michael Dogby. Like, those were guys in the late rounds that our buddies Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, Jack Duffin, those guys were all saying, like, you need to go get these guys. They're going to help right away. So Fotu would be perfect. Like you said, you could ease him in next season behind Richardson and Ogunjobi, and then you hope in a couple years that he could step up with Ogunjobi. Granted that we keep Ogunjobi because, it seems to be a trend that, Sashi's guys are being shown the door by Dorsey. But Fotu would be a perfect fit, and it would address a need that's obviously significant on the Browns' defensive line.
Sticking with the defensive theme, we desperately need safeties on this team. And we talked about Demarius Randall earlier and about how he's checked out and he won't be back, or most likely won't be back next season. So with the next 2 picks, I took a pair of safeties, Richard LeCount III, a safety out of Georgia, and Antoine Winfield Jr., a safety out of Minnesota. I think those 2 guys could really fit well in a defensive secondary for the Browns.
Absolutely. Safety is definitely a top need. I'm shocked you skipped over Colin Johnson, not just once, but twice. But yeah, safety is a definite need. Antoine Winfield Jr., obviously, we know Antoine Winfield from Cleveland, had a long NFL career. His son was playing dominant ball this year for Minnesota, was a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. Much to the chagrin of a lot of Buckeye fans who were disappointed it wasn't Jeffrey Okudah. But Winfield can definitely play. And obviously, LeCount's going up against some big-time receivers down there in the SEC and has played very well. So I would expect, the Browns to maybe draft a couple safeties like you did here and obviously add some in free agency. Obviously, they'll bring back Sheldrick Redwine. Morgan Burnett probably comes back. We'll see how he rehabs from the Achilles injury, but safety is definitely a pressing need for this team. And because the corners are set, I think, with Greedy and Denzel, as long as they continue to develop and stay healthy. But safety is obviously something they have to address this offseason.
Earlier, I included a cornerback, Bryce Hall, out of Virginia, and I didn't take him at that point. But in the 6th round, I did take a corner, Levante Taylor, out of Florida State. I think they need to continue to add to the cornerback room and add more guys there. I'm not sure if Carey and Mitchell will be back. I know Carey kind of has a big cap hit, so we'll see if they decide to keep him or not for next year. So I could definitely see them adding a couple corners in the draft and in undrafted free agency as well. So Levante Taylor is one guy that I took. And to wrap up the draft, I took a tight end out of Dayton, Adam Trotman. I think we desperately need a blocking tight end in this offense, Jack, and especially if you're going to go in with a couple rookie tackles or at least one of them. I definitely think you need a guy who blocks very well, and so I could see them adding a blocking type tight end in the draft.
Yeah, the tight end position is definitely in question going into this offseason because, David Njoku seems to be at odds with the coaching staff, perhaps even the front office. It's obviously a contract year coming up for Njoku because the Browns will have to make the decision on the 5th-year option. So it wouldn't shock me if they go out and get a tight end at some point, whether it's free agency or the draft. They seem to like these big physical tight ends. They have Harris. They have Ricky Seals-Jones, Steven Carlson, and obviously Njoku is big and physical in his own right. So if they go out and grab another one, it wouldn't surprise me because I tend to think now that Njoku isn't in their long-term plans, but we will see. Obviously, a new coaching staff could come in and want to keep him around, but only time will tell with that.
So to wrap up the selections, it was 2 offensive tackles, 2 safeties, a defensive tackle, corner, and tight end. Yeah, I think that would be a good solid base going into next season for the Browns. Currently, after yesterday, they are sitting at pick number 12. If the Browns lose against the Bengals, the highest pick they could have is number 9, with a couple other teams winning. If the Browns win next week and some of those 7 and 9 teams lose, the Browns pick could fall all the way to 16, 17 range. The Browns have a higher strength of schedule than all of the 7 and 8 teams currently. So those teams would win the tiebreaker, and it would drop the Browns potentially all the way down to 17. Those 7 and 8 teams are Oakland, Dallas, Indianapolis, and Tampa Bay. So you're desperately rooting for all those teams to win next week to kind of help the Browns stay in the current position where they are now. Jack, is there anything else you want to discuss in terms of draft or for the rest of this podcast?
Just one note on the draft order, don't want the Browns to lose next week. Definitely. I want them to go out on the season with a good note. Because I think regardless of whether they win or lose, they're making a change at head coach. But, I'm not opposed to them losing in terms of the draft order because it's apparent they're not going to be able to get Andrew Thomas. It seems like he is at lock to go in the top 5. Right now he's projected 3rd to the Detroit Lions. But if they can, get to 9, they're right there for Wirfs or Leatherwood. They got to be in position to get one of these top offensive tackles. Not necessarily meaning that they wouldn't trade up to get one, but I want them to stay right in the range they are because that's where these tackles should start coming off the board. And like I said, it's apparent that the Browns get one of these guys come April. Or
because this draft is so deep at the offensive tackle position, Jack, they could take a guy like a Grant Delpit, safety at LSU, if he's there at that 9-10 pick, and then come back in the second round and take one of those offensive tackles if they believe that they would fit in well at that position.
Yeah, I'm looking at Tankathon's mock right now. With the 43rd pick, they have us taking Josh Jones out of Houston, offensive tackle. I do know, and Stephen Thomas has stated this several times, the Browns have been scouting him throughout the season. They've been down to Houston several times to meet with him. So I think it's apparent that the current regime does like Josh Jones. So if they could get him in the second round, that would be a good get for the Browns. I think it's apparent that they like him. But yeah, like you said, if they could get Delpit, he's been a great player at the safety position for LSU. They seem to churn out defensive backs that have gone on to have success in the National Football League. So, it's still early. Obviously, we got 4 months to go. So there's obviously going to be a lot of draft talk here. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, we have a lot that we'll be discussing with the draft over the next 4 months. We'll be sure to get Stephen Thomas in here, a.k.a. Browns Mock Draft, and talk about this quite a bit. So there's a lot that we're going to do over the next 4 months to prepare for the draft. Since the season is now over, we'll be sure to talk head coaching stuff, free agency, everything having to do with the Browns coming up here in the new year. So, Jack, I want to wish you if I could butcher that any worse, I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas, you and your family. I hope you guys have a nice, relaxing day. Spending time with the family is always a good thing, and I hope you guys have a good Christmas. And I'm sure we'll be back here later on this week to preview the final game against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, man. Merry Christmas to you as well. Merry Christmas to all our listeners. Anthony, you forgot to even mention this is episode number 150 for us. It's been a long 3 years. We've had our highs, we've had our lows, but it's been awesome working with you, man. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you and your family, and once again, Merry Christmas to the listeners, and thank you, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your guys' support, and we wish you all a healthy and happy holiday.
Yeah, I definitely echo that sentiment. I can't believe we're at episode 150, and it's been a long ride. We've definitely had more lows than highs, and hopefully those highs are around the corner for us. So with all that, we're going to get on out here. You guys can follow Jack on Twitter at JMcCurryCLE. Follow me on Twitter at Anthony Jokey. Follow the podcast and our website at The Dogland. On Twitter as well. You can find our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. With all that, like I said earlier, like Jack mentioned, have a very Merry Christmas. Be safe. If you guys are going out drinking, doing stuff, call Uber, call Lyft. Don't drink and drive. Stay safe. Most importantly, go Browns.